The vast lecture hall of the Galactic University fell silent as Professor Gray entered, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the light from the twin suns outside. Today's class would be different. They were starting their study of newly discovered civilizations, and Earth was first on the list. The young alien students settled into their seats, some floating, others perched on specially designed chairs that accommodated their unique physiologies. Most had never heard of Earth before, except in passing mentions about a Death World species that had recently joined the Galactic Federation. Today, Professor Gray began, his translator working flawlessly. We will examine one of the most fascinating species to join our community, humans from Earth. He activated the holographic display, showing a blue and green planet spinning slowly in the center of the room. A student raised their appendage. "Professor, why study such a primitive world? They've barely achieved interstellar travel." The professor's crystalline form shifted colors slightly, indicating amusement. "Primitive? Let me show you something." He switched the display to a historical recording of a human battlefield. The scene showed soldiers charging across muddy ground while explosions lit up the sky. Gasps echoed through the lecture hall. Most species in the galaxy had evolved past physical combat millions of years ago, preferring diplomatic solutions or, at worst, cyber warfare. The sight of beings willingly engaging in close-quarter combat was shocking. "This," Professor Gray continued, "is from something humans call World War I. And believe it or not, this wasn't even their most brutal conflict." He paused, letting that sink in. Humans have a unique history. While we were developing meditation chambers and pleasure gardens, they were creating increasingly sophisticated ways to fight and survive. Another student, their gelatinous form quivering with confusion, spoke up. "But Professor, how did they not destroy themselves?" "That's the fascinating part," Gray responded, his form now glowing with excitement. "Humans possess an extraordinary ability to both create and destroy. They can wage devastating wars, then turn around and create beautiful art, music, and literature. They can design weapons of mass destruction, then use the same technology to heal and save lives." The hologram shifted to show various human achievements, medical breakthroughs, space exploration, environmental restoration projects. But what truly sets them apart is their resilience. Every time they faced near extinction, whether from their own actions or natural disasters, they not only survived but emerged stronger. A quiet murmur spread through the class as the students processed this information. The professor continued, "Their combat history, while shocking to us, has given them unique advantages. They understand concepts that many species in the galaxy never needed to learn. Strategy, tactical thinking." The hologram now showed the signing of Earth's admission to the Galactic Federation. "This is why we study them. Because in just a few thousand years, they've experienced what took other species millions of years to learn. Their brutal history has forged them into something unprecedented in our galaxy, a species that understands both the horrors of war and the precious nature of peace." As the first class session drew to a close, Professor Gray could see his students were deeply affected by what they'd learned. Some appeared disturbed, others fascinated, but all of them now understood why Earth and its inhabitants warranted careful study. "For your next class," he announced, "we'll examine how humans turned their combat expertise into one of their greatest diplomatic assets. You might be surprised to learn that it's precisely their understanding of warfare that makes them such effective peacekeepers in our modern galactic conflicts." The students filed out of the lecture hall, their various forms moving with purpose, each lost in thought about these strange creatures called humans. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of their journey into understanding Earth's complex and fascinating history. The next day, Professor Gray's lecture hall was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread about the fascinating first lecture on humans, and even students from other departments had come to learn about these intriguing creatures from Earth. Today, Professor Gray announced, his crystalline form pulsing with vibrant colors, "We'll explore what humans call adaptive warfare, a concept that makes them unique in the galaxy. He activated the holographic system, this time displaying multiple battle scenarios simultaneously. Most species, he continued, develop one primary form of combat and stick to it. The Mist Collective uses psychic attacks. The Stone Bearers rely on overwhelming force. But humans? He paused, his form flickering with excitement. Humans adapt. They learn. They evolve their tactics with shocking speed. The hologram shifted to show ancient human battles, spears, swords, and shields clashing in dusty fields. This was them 3,000 years ago. The image changed to modern warfare, then to space combat simulations. And this is them now. In the time it takes most species to perfect one combat style, humans mastered hundreds. A student with floating tentacles raised 3 of them at once. Professor, surely this makes them dangerous to the Federation? Why would we allow such aggressive beings to join? Professor Gray's response was immediate. An excellent question. Let me show you something remarkable. The hologram changed to display Earth's emergency response teams in action. These are the same humans, using their combat experience to save lives. Watch closely. Knowing how to fight makes them better at preventing fights from starting. The hologram showed a final image, a human peacekeeping force standing between 2 hostile alien species, preventing a war through their mere presence. Their reputation as warriors actually makes them more effective as peacekeepers. Few species are willing to start a conflict when humans are serving as mediators. As the class drew to a close, Professor Gray had one final message. For next time, prepare yourselves. We'll be discussing what humans call unconventional warfare, and I warn you, it will challenge everything you thought you knew about combat evolution. The students left the lecture hall in contemplative silence, many of them accessing their data terminals to learn more about these fascinating humans. Some were already signing up for Earth studies as their secondary focus, eager to understand more about a species that had turned their brutal history into a force for galactic peace. The third day of Professor Gray's lectures on human combat history drew an even larger crowd. The lecture hall's environmental systems struggled to accommodate the diverse array of species packed into the space, from plasma-based beings to silicon life forms. Professor Gray's crystalline form glowed with anticipation as he began. Today, we explore what humans call unconventional warfare, a concept so unique that it forced us to rewrite several texts on combat evolution. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a dense jungle environment. Consider this scenario, he began. You're a technologically superior force. You have energy weapons, force fields, and anti-gravity vehicles. Your enemy has primitive projectile weapons and simple explosives. Logic suggests an easy victory, correct? The students nodded or gestured in agreement, their various appendages moving in synchronization. Wrong. The professor's form flashed dramatically. Humans call this asymmetric warfare, and they've perfected it to an art form. Watch. The hologram showed historical footage from Earth's Vietnam War. Students watched in fascination as seemingly primitive forces used the environment, improvised traps, and guerrilla tactics to counter a technologically superior enemy. Humans have a saying, Professor Gray continued. The more complex the system, the more ways it can fail. They exploit this principle masterfully. While other species focus on building better weapons, humans think about how to turn their enemies' strengths into weaknesses. A student made of pure energy pulsed brightly. But Professor, our tactical simulations always show that superior technology wins conflicts. Ah, Professor Gray's form sparkled with enthusiasm. That's because your simulations are based on conventional logic. Humans excel at being unconventional. Let me show you something that will challenge your understanding of warfare. The hologram shifted to display various human improvised weapons and tactics throughout history. Humans call this thinking outside the box, a concept so important that it's now mandatory study for all Federation military strategists. The display showed humans using simple tools in unexpected ways, turning farming equipment into weapons, creating elaborate disguises with natural materials, and developing communication systems using seemingly primitive methods. But here's what truly sets them apart, Professor Gray continued, his crystalline structure resonating with excitement. Humans can wage war without firing a single shot. They call it psychological warfare. The hologram displayed examples of human deception tactics, inflatable tanks that fooled advanced scanning systems, mirror arrays that created phantom army formations, and sound weapons that induced panic in enemy forces. One human commander, Gray explained, once defeated an enemy force 3 times their size by simply making them believe they were surrounded. No weapons fired, no lives lost, yet the victory was complete. A silicon-based student raised their crystalline appendage. "Professor, this seems dishonorable. Surely direct combat is more appropriate?" The professor's form pulsed with gentle correction. "That's a common misconception. Humans believe the most honorable victory is one that minimizes casualties on both sides. They see outsmarting an enemy as preferable to destroying them." The hologram shifted to show modern applications. Since joining the Federation, humans have revolutionized our approach to conflict resolution. Their expertise in unconventional thinking helped us resolve the Great Nebula crisis without a single shot fired. The display showed human negotiators using psychological principles to defuse tensions between species that had been at war for centuries. They understand that the greatest victory is often achieved by making your enemy see you as a friend. But perhaps most remarkably, Professor Gray continued, humans have developed what they call hybrid warfare, the simultaneous use of conventional, unconventional, psychological, and diplomatic tactics. The hologram displayed a complex web of interconnected strategies. In one recent case, human peacekeepers prevented an interstellar war by simultaneously deploying conventional forces as a deterrent, using guerrilla tactics to disrupt weapon shipments, launching a psychological campaign to sway public opinion, and conducting diplomatic negotiations. All these elements worked in perfect harmony. A student with multiple brain clusters vibrated with curiosity. How do they manage such complexity? Most species can barely coordinate 2 tactical approaches simultaneously. That's the beauty of human adaptability, Professor Gray responded. Their brutal history forced them to develop mental flexibility. They can switch between different modes of warfare instantly, combining approaches in ways that other species find impossible to predict or counter. The professor then revealed something that made the entire class buzz with excitement. The Federation Strategic Command is currently developing a new combat doctrine based entirely on human principles of unconventional warfare. For the first time in galactic history, we're learning warfare from a species younger than our oldest buildings. The hologram showed the latest Federation peacekeeping operations, now incorporating human tactical innovations. Notice how these operations use minimal force but achieve maximum effect. This is the human influence, the understanding that the cleverest warrior wins without fighting. As the lecture neared its end, Professor Gray prepared his final revelation. For our next session, we'll examine what humans call total warfare, a concept so shocking that its mere existence changed how the Federation views defensive strategy. I must warn you, what you'll learn will fundamentally change your understanding of combat potential. The students departed in excited clusters, their various forms animated with discussion. Many were already accessing historical databases, eager to learn more about human unconventional warfare techniques. Some were even attempting to practice human-style lateral thinking, trying to find unusual solutions to everyday problems. What none of them realized was that this understanding of human combat innovation was just the beginning. The next lecture would reveal something even more extraordinary about Earth's unusual inhabitants, their capacity for escalation in the face of existential threats. The 4th day of Professor Gray's lectures began differently. Two Federation security officers stood at the entrance, scanning students before entry. Inside, the lecture hall's atmospheric controls had been adjusted to a tense frequency. Professor Gray's crystalline form pulsed with a deep, serious hue. Today's subject matter is classified as sensitivity level red. What you learn here is considered crucial knowledge for understanding human capabilities, but it may be disturbing. The holographic display activated, showing Earth during what humans called World War II. We've discussed conventional warfare, adaptive combat, and unconventional tactics. Now, we explore humanity's most terrifying capability, total warfare. The professor's form darkened. Most species wage war with armies. Humans? They wage war with entire civilizations. The hologram showed factories converting from civilian to military production, civilian populations mobilizing for war efforts, and entire economies restructuring for combat. In total warfare, there is no distinction between military and civilian resources. Everything, every factory, every farm, every mind, becomes part of the war machine. The display showed images of civilian scientists developing military technology, children collecting resources for recycling into weapons, and entire cities working round the clock for the war effort. A student of gaseous composition swirled anxiously. "Professor, this seems to violate all principles of civilized combat. Surely the Federation doesn't condone this?" Professor Gray's response was measured. The Federation's position is complex. While we don't endorse total warfare, understanding it is crucial. Because humans don't just fight with weapons, they fight with innovation, industry, and incredible social cooperation. The hologram shifted to show the Manhattan Project. This may be the most dramatic example. Humans, facing an existential threat, assembled their brightest minds in secret cities. They unlocked the power of the atom, not over centuries like other species, but in mere years. A collective shudder ran through the class as they grasped the implications. The professor continued, "But here's what's truly remarkable, humans developed these devastating capabilities, used them twice, and then spent decades ensuring they would never be used again." The display showed the modern Earth peace movement, nuclear disarmament treaties, and international cooperation efforts. This is uniquely human, the capacity for both ultimate destruction and ultimate restraint. A crystalline student chimed with a harmonic of distress. How can any species survive such extremes? That, Professor Gray's form brightened, is the fascinating paradox of humanity. Their capability for total warfare made them deeply aware of its cost. They learned to fear their own potential. The hologram showed the transformation of military technology into civilian applications. Nuclear weapons led to nuclear medicine and power. Military aircraft became civilian transport. Combat communication systems evolved into the global internet. But perhaps most importantly, the professor continued, humans learned to use the threat of total warfare to maintain peace. They call it mutually assured destruction, the understanding that full-scale war would be catastrophic for all sides. The display shifted to show modern human peacekeeping operations. This is why humans are so effective at preventing conflicts. When they warn about the consequences of war, every species in the galaxy listens. They speak from experience. A student composed of living metal raised an appendage. "Professor, you mentioned this knowledge is classified as sensitivity level red. Why?" Professor Gray's form pulsed with serious tones. "Because human total warfare capabilities extend beyond physical combat. They can mobilize their entire species' resources in response to any existential threat, not just military ones." The hologram showed human responses to global challenges, climate change, pandemic diseases, asteroid deflection programs. When humans declare war on a problem, they commit their entire civilization to solving it. This level of unified purpose is unknown among other species. Recently, the professor revealed, the Federation faced a crisis with the void-born entities from the galactic core. Most species proposed typical diplomatic or military solutions. The humans? They submitted a plan for converting 40% of Earth's industrial capacity to produce specialized void-resistant materials within 6 months. The class fell silent, processing the implications. A species willing and able to transform their entire civilization's purpose on such short notice was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. But here's what truly sets humans apart, Professor Gray continued. They maintain this capability while building safeguards against its misuse. Their history taught them that power requires restraint. The hologram displayed the complex web of human international laws, treaties, and cooperative agreements. They created systems to prevent any single group from initiating total warfare unilaterally. They understand their own destructive potential better than any outside observer could. A student of quantum probability fluctuated uncertainly. Professor, if humans possess such devastating capabilities, why did the Federation accept them? Professor Gray's form shifted to a warm, reassuring glow. Because humans also possess something equally powerful, the desire to prevent others from experiencing the horrors they've survived. They don't want to teach the galaxy how to wage total war, they want to teach us how to prevent it. The hologram showed human diplomatic missions throughout the galaxy. Their experience with total warfare gave them unique insights into maintaining peace. They understand that the best way to prevent war is to be fully prepared for it while working tirelessly to make it unnecessary. As the lecture concluded, Professor Gray had one final revelation. Tomorrow, we'll discuss something even more remarkable: human recovery and reconstruction capabilities. Because as frightening as human total warfare might be, their ability to rebuild and forgive might be their most impressive characteristic. The students left in thoughtful silence, many of them viewing their human classmates in a new light. They began to understand why the Federation's defensive doctrine had changed so dramatically since Earth joined the galactic community. What awaited them in the next lecture would challenge their understanding not just of warfare, but of civilization itself, the extraordinary human capacity for rebuilding, forgiveness, and transformation after conflict. The 5th day of Professor Gray's lectures opened with an unexpected display. The holographic system showed a ruined city, completely devastated by war. Many students recoiled, their various forms expressing distress at the scene of destruction. Yesterday, Professor Gray began, his crystalline structure gleaming softly, we explored humanity's capacity for total warfare. Today, we witness something even more remarkable: their ability to rise from the ashes. The hologram shifted, showing the same city rebuilt, gleaming with new structures. Then another destroyed city, and its resurrection. Then another, and another. Each transformation more impressive than the last. This, the professor's form pulsed with quiet amazement, is what truly sets humans apart. Not their capacity for destruction, but their extraordinary ability to rebuild, forgive, and transform after conflict. The display focused on a specific case study, the city of Hiroshima. This human city suffered the first atomic weapon in history. By conventional galactic wisdom, such an area should have remained uninhabitable for centuries. Instead, observe. The hologram showed Hiroshima's transformation from atomic wasteland to thriving metropolis. Within a single human lifetime, they didn't just rebuild, they created something greater than what was lost. But the physical reconstruction isn't the most impressive part. The display shifted to show Japanese and American diplomats working together just decades after the war. This is what puzzles other species most. Humans can go from mortal enemies to steadfast allies in a span of time that most civilizations would consider impossibly brief. A student composed of quantum probability waves fluctuated in confusion. Professor, our studies indicate that species retain conflict-based animosity for at least 12 generations. How do humans overcome this so quickly? Professor Gray's form brightened. An excellent question. Humans possess what they call historical memory, combined with forward thinking. They remember their conflicts, learn from them, but refuse to be imprisoned by them. The hologram displayed the European Union's formation. Consider this: regions that fought brutal wars for centuries united economically and politically within decades. They didn't forget their history, they chose to build a different future. A crystalline student chimed with harmonic curiosity. But surely there must be lingering resentment? Our species took millennia to forgive minor territorial disputes. That's the fascinating part, Professor Gray continued. Humans don't require complete forgetting or forgiveness to cooperate. They've developed something they call pragmatic reconciliation, the ability to work together despite past conflicts. The display showed various post-war reconstruction efforts, the Marshall Plan, the rebuilding of Germany and Japan, modern disaster relief missions to former enemy nations. Humans learned that helping former enemies rebuild serves everyone's interests. They call it enlightened self-interest. A gaseous student swirled thoughtfully. Professor, you mentioned this is more impressive than their warfare capabilities. Why? Professor Gray's form shifted to a deep, scholarly hue. Because rebuilding requires more strength than destruction. Any species can learn to destroy. But rebuilding? That requires vision, forgiveness, and something humans call hope, the ability to imagine and work toward a better future despite current circumstances. The hologram displayed human disaster response teams, not military units, but civilian experts in reconstruction and recovery. Humans have developed an entire science of post-disaster recovery. They can rebuild infrastructure faster than any known species. But more importantly, they rebuild communities. The professor revealed a startling statistic. Since joining the Federation, human reconstruction experts have reduced post-conflict recovery time on other worlds by an average of 84%. They've turned their hard-earned expertise in rebuilding into a galactic service. A student of pure energy pulsed with revelation. Is this why the Federation values them so highly? Not their military strength, but their reconstruction abilities? Precisely, Professor Gray's form sparkled. Any species can learn to fight. But humans teach us how to heal. They show us how to move forward after conflict. This is infinitely more valuable. The hologram shifted to show various human aid missions throughout the galaxy. They don't just rebuild physical structures. They help restore trade networks, establish new diplomatic channels, and most importantly, they teach other species how to prevent future conflicts. But perhaps their most remarkable innovation, the professor continued, is something they call truth and reconciliation. Instead of burying the past, they face it openly, acknowledge wrongs, and work to prevent their repetition. The display showed various truth and reconciliation commissions throughout human history. This process often causes short-term pain but leads to longer-lasting peace. It's a concept so effective that 12 Federation species have now adopted modified versions of it. A silicon-based student raised a crystalline appendage. Professor, how do humans maintain this capability for renewal without losing their combat effectiveness? Professor Gray's form pulsed with appreciation for the insightful question. Humans view reconstruction as a form of combat, fighting against despair, fighting for hope. They apply the same determination and resources to rebuilding that they do to warfare. The hologram showed the contrast between human military budgets and their disaster response funds. Many human nations now maintain reconstruction reserves as large as their military budgets. They've learned that the ability to rebuild is as crucial to survival as the ability to fight. As the lecture neared its end, Professor Gray revealed something that made the entire class buzz with excitement. The Federation has recently established the Human Reconstruction Corps, a specialized unit of human experts who deploy throughout the galaxy to assist with post-conflict recovery. Their motto? Building bridges, not just between shores, but between species. The display showed these human experts at work, teaching other species not just how to rebuild structures, but how to rebuild trust. This, the professor emphasized, is humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, not their warriors, but their healers. Not their capacity for warfare, but their mastery of peace. As students prepared to leave, Professor Gray had one final announcement. Tomorrow's lecture will explore something even more extraordinary: human theoretical warfare and defensive innovations. Because humans don't just excel at fighting wars or rebuilding after them. They've mastered the art of preventing them entirely through what they call defensive deterrence. The students departed, many of them accessing human historical records about reconstruction efforts. They were beginning to understand that humanity's true strength lay not in their capacity for destruction, but in their unmatched ability to create, rebuild, and transform. On the final day of his legendary lecture series, Professor Gray's crystalline form radiated with an intensity that filled the packed hall. Students from every faculty had gathered, some even floating outside the windows, to witness the conclusion of what had become the most talked-about course in Galactic University history. Today, Professor Gray began, his form shifting through complex patterns. We explore humanity's ultimate contribution to galactic peace, their mastery of theoretical warfare and defensive deterrence. What you learn today will revolutionize your understanding of conflict prevention. The holographic display activated, showing an intricate web of interconnected scenarios. Humans have developed something they call war gaming, not the pursuit of war, but the systematic analysis of every possible conflict scenario to prevent it from occurring. A student of quantum probability raised an appendage. Professor, surely other species have conducted combat simulations before? Ah, Professor Gray's form sparkled with anticipation. But human war gaming goes far beyond simple combat simulations. They analyze everything: economic impacts, social consequences, psychological effects, technological limitations, and even environmental changes. They call it full-spectrum analysis. The hologram showed the intricate detail of human defense planning. Thousands of scenarios, each with hundreds of variables, all interconnected in a vast web of cause and effect. Humans don't just plan for winning conflicts, the professor continued. They plan for preventing them entirely. They've developed something called defensive deterrence, the art of making warfare so complicated and costly that potential aggressors choose peace instead. The display shifted to show the Federation's new defense grid, designed with human consultation. Notice how these defensive installations aren't designed to destroy attackers, but to deny them any possibility of meaningful victory. This is human thinking: make war pointless rather than impossible. A crystalline student chimed with curiosity. But Professor, our records show humans still maintain significant offensive capabilities. Why, if they focus on defense? Professor Gray's form pulsed with approval at the question. Because humans understand something profound about peace, it must be maintained from a position of strength. They have a saying: if you want peace, prepare for war. But they've given it a unique twist. The hologram displayed Earth's modern military doctrine. Humans maintain offensive capabilities not to use them, but to understand how they might be used against them. They think like attackers to build better defenses. But here's what truly sets them apart, the professor continued, his form glowing intensely. Humans have developed peace gaming alongside war gaming. They don't just simulate how wars start, they simulate how peace can be maintained under the most challenging circumstances. The display showed an intricate simulation of diplomatic, economic, and cultural interactions between species. Humans understand that lasting peace requires more than military deterrence. It needs cultural understanding, economic cooperation, and social bonds. A gaseous student swirled excitedly. Is this why the Federation adopted human diplomatic protocols? Exactly. Professor Gray's form flashed brilliantly. Humans designed their diplomatic system based on their understanding of conflict. They know precisely how wars start, so they've created diplomatic frameworks specifically to prevent those conditions from arising. The hologram shifted to show the Federation's new early warning and response system, based on human design. This system doesn't just detect potential military threats. It identifies diplomatic tensions, economic pressures, and social conflicts before they escalate into warfare. But perhaps most remarkably, the professor continued, humans have developed what they call constructive engagement, the art of turning potential adversaries into partners. The display showed various human diplomatic missions, each employing this strategy. They don't just try to prevent conflicts. They actively create conditions for cooperation. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, joint scientific projects, all designed to make peace more profitable than war. A student of pure energy pulsed with revelation. Professor, are you suggesting that humans are actually better at preventing wars than fighting them? Professor Gray's form resonated with approval. Now you understand. Their combat history taught them the true cost of warfare, making them the galaxy's foremost experts in preventing it. They've turned their brutal past into a force for universal peace. The hologram displayed a stunning statistic. Since implementing human defensive protocols, the Federation had seen a 94% reduction in interspecies conflicts. But here's their most extraordinary innovation, the professor announced. Humans have developed predictive peace technology, systems that can identify and nurture peaceful relationships before conflicts even become possible. The display showed the complex networks of trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange that humans had helped establish throughout the galaxy. They call it peace infrastructure, making war inconceivable by making peace indispensable. A silicon-based student raised their crystalline appendage. Professor, how do humans maintain such complex systems? That, Professor Gray's form pulsed with excitement, brings us to their greatest achievement. Humans have created what they call adaptive peace, peace that strengthens itself over time. The hologram showed how human-designed systems learned and evolved, automatically identifying and reinforcing successful peace-building strategies while modifying less effective ones. They've turned their legendary adaptability in warfare toward preserving peace, the professor explained. Each potential conflict becomes an opportunity to strengthen peace mechanisms. Each diplomatic success teaches the system how to prevent future conflicts more effectively. As the lecture series drew to a close, Professor Gray had one final revelation. The Federation Council has just approved the establishment of the Human Peace Academy, an institution where humans will teach other species not just how to prevent wars, but how to make peace self-sustaining. The hologram showed the Academy's construction plans. This, the professor emphasized, is humanity's true legacy to the galaxy. Not their warfare capabilities, not even their reconstruction expertise, but their unmatched ability to forge lasting peace from the lessons of conflict. Remember, Professor Gray concluded, his form glowing with profound respect, humans didn't join the Federation as just another species. They joined as teachers, showing us how to transform the very nature of peace itself. Their brutal history wasn't just a tragedy, it was the forge in which the galaxy's future peace was shaped. As the students filed out of the lecture hall for the last time, many found themselves looking at the universe differently. They had entered the course expecting to learn about warfare. Instead, they had learned about transformation, how a species could turn its darkest chapters into tools for universal enlightenment. Professor Gray watched them leave, his crystalline form radiating satisfaction. The next generation of galactic leaders now understood that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their capacity for warfare, it was their determination to ensure that warfare would never again be necessary.